The colony base stood in silence under the pale sky of the alien world, its walls shining with cold steel, its watchtowers scanning the horizon with red lights. Inside those walls, locked in chains thicker than a man's body, was the Giantess. She was unlike anything the soldiers had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly in the moonlight, pale but strong like carved stone. Her golden eyes glowed even in darkness, watching every human who dared come close. Her hair, black and tangled, spread across the floor like a river of shadow. She was tall, taller than the mechs the soldiers used for war. But now she sat crouched, chained at the wrists, ankles, and neck, unable to move more than a few steps. The humans called her the captive. Some whispered another word, monster. For many days, no one spoke to her. The soldiers only stared, guns always ready, fingers always on triggers. The scientists took notes, keeping their distance, afraid of her sudden strength. The commander had given strict orders. Do not feed the creature. Do not trust the creature. She is dangerous and she will never be one of us. So they left her there. But time passed and something strange happened. The Giantess grew weaker. Her breaths were heavy, her movements slower. Her stomach growled, echoing in the empty hangar like thunder. She tried to hide her hunger, but everyone saw. Still, no one gave her food. The soldiers joked about it. Let her starve. Easier for us. The scientists stayed cold. If she dies, we still have her body for research. Only one man thought differently. He was not a commander, not a soldier, not a scientist. He was just a worker, a cleaner, someone whose job was to fix broken machines, carry supplies, and stay out of the way. His name was not famous and no one cared much about him. He walked the halls quietly, keeping his head down. But when he passed the hangar and looked at the chained Giantess, he felt something the others did not. He felt pity. He remembered the way her eyes had once burned with fury, but now looked heavy with sadness. He remembered how she had once pulled at her chains with the strength of a storm, but now only sat slumped, silent, almost lifeless. And he thought, she is not just a monster. She is alive. She is suffering. At first, he tried to ignore it. He told himself, it's not my problem. The commander gave orders. If I disobey, I will be punished, maybe even executed. But every night when he lay in his bunk, he could not sleep. He kept seeing her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Not angry, not hateful, just empty. The silence of the colony base grew heavier. Even the soldiers stopped joking. Everyone knew the Giantess was dying, but no one cared enough to stop it, except him. One night, when the base lights dimmed and most soldiers were asleep, he made his choice. He slipped into the kitchen, stole a tray of food, bread, fruit, a flask of water, and wrapped it in cloth. His hands shook as he carried it. His heart pounded. Every step toward the hangar felt dangerous. Every shadow looked like a guard ready to catch him. When he reached the door, he hesitated. He thought, if I open this door, I may not come out alive. She could crush me in a second. She could eat me instead of the food. But then he heard a sound inside. It was her, the Giantess. A soft, low hum, almost like a song echoing through the metal walls. A song filled with loneliness. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The hangar was dark, except for the dim red lights. The Giantess sat against the far wall, her head bowed, chains clinking softly as she moved. When she heard him, she slowly raised her head, her golden eyes locked onto him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. His knees shook. His breath caught in his throat. He thought she might roar or try to break free, but she only watched him. Slowly, carefully, he placed the tray of food on the floor, just beyond the reach of her chains. He stepped back quickly, his heart racing. The Giantess tilted her head, studying him. Her eyes narrowed. Then, with a slow, almost graceful movement, she leaned forward, stretched her arm as far as the chains allowed, and dragged the tray closer. She sniffed the food. Then she ate. The worker stood frozen, unable to believe what he was seeing. She ate carefully, not like a beast tearing flesh, but like a person who had not eaten in days. When she finished, she raised her eyes again to him, and for the first time her face softened. She did not smile, but the fury was gone. The hunger was gone. Only silence remained between them. The worker felt his chest tighten. He thought, I should leave now. I should run before anyone sees. But deep inside, he knew something had changed, something dangerous. Something important. Something that could change not just his life, but the fate of all humanity, because no one else had dared to feed the captive giantess. No one else, except him. The next morning, the base buzzed with the usual noise of machines and orders, but in the worker's mind, nothing felt the same. He had done something no one else dared. He had fed the captive giantess. All day his thoughts returned to the moment she had looked at him, not with hate, not with rage, but with something softer, something human. He told himself it was only hunger, only survival. But a question haunted him. What if she understood? What if she knows I helped her? By evening, the soldiers laughed as usual in the mess hall, mocking the chained prisoner. Let her starve, one sneered. She's nothing but an animal, another said. The worker stayed quiet, staring into his bowl of soup. He wanted to speak, to say she is more than that, but fear held his tongue. If they knew what he had done, they would throw him in a cell, or worse. That night, when the base grew quiet again, his feet carried him back to the hangar almost without thinking. He moved carefully through the shadows, clutching another tray of food. His heart raced as he opened the door, the same heavy door that separated the world of humans from the world of the giantess. The hangar was dim, lit by a few flickering lamps. The giantess was awake this time, sitting cross-legged, her chains rattling softly with every shift. Her golden eyes found him at once. She did not roar. She did not lunge. She only watched. His throat went dry. He stepped forward slowly and placed the tray closer than before. He did not retreat immediately this time. Something inside urged him to stay. The giantess leaned forward, her movements slow and careful, as if she did not want to frighten him. She picked up a piece of fruit with her massive hand and ate, but as she did, she kept her eyes locked on him. The worker swallowed hard. He whispered, barely audible, "You're welcome." To his shock, the giantess paused. Her head tilted. A low hum escaped her chest. Not a growl, not a threat, but a sound that carried weight like a voice beneath the earth. He froze. Is she trying to answer me? She chewed the food slowly, then lifted a finger and tapped it against the floor. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed like distant drums. The worker frowned. Was it random? Or was she trying to count? He crouched down and with his finger tapped back 1, 2, 3. The giantess blinked. Then, to his astonishment, she repeated the pattern. His breath caught. This was not chance. This was communication. For several minutes they exchanged taps and hums, a language of rhythm and sound. It was clumsy, broken, but it was something. Then came the moment that would burn itself into his memory forever. The giantess lowered her head, her long hair spilling like a curtain, and formed a single word with her deep, rough voice. It was heavy, cracked, like stone grinding on stone, but clear enough for him to understand. Friend. The worker's heart nearly stopped. His ears rang with the power of that word. She had spoken in their language. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but enough. Friend, she repeated, her golden eyes glowing brighter now, searching his face. He stepped back, his breath quick and shallow. The air felt too heavy, his mind too full. Was this real? Was she truly intelligent, learning their words, reaching out? Every warning from the commander echoed in his head. Do not feed the creature. Do not trust the creature, but how could he ignore this? She had spoken. She had chosen her first human word, and it was not kill, not hate, not enemy. It was friend. The worker's legs trembled. He whispered back, friend. For a brief second, silence filled the hangar. Then the giantess closed her eyes and a deep exhale escaped her, almost like a sigh of relief. The chains rattled as she shifted, but this time, there was no threat in her movement. She curled up slightly, resting her head against her arm, as if his single word had given her peace. The worker stood there for a long time, unable to move, staring at the impossible. Finally, he turned and slipped out of the hangar, his chest pounding, his mind burning with questions. The next day, he tried to go about his work, but nothing felt normal. He fixed machines, carried supplies, nodded at officers, but every moment was haunted by the memory of her voice. Friend. It echoed inside him like a secret song. That evening, as the sun set over the alien horizon, he found himself again at the hangar door. The decision no longer felt like madness, it felt like destiny. The guards barely noticed him. He was just a worker, invisible, harmless. No one would ever guess he carried the weight of a secret that could change everything. Inside, the giantess waited. She raised her head as he entered, and though her face was tired, her eyes were not empty anymore. They burned with quiet fire. He brought her more food, but this time he did not place it on the ground and leave. He stayed. He sat on the cold floor, not too close, but closer than any human had dared. For a while, they simply looked at each other. No words, no fear. Just silence, heavy and strange, but no longer hostile. And in that silence, a bond began to form. Fragile, dangerous, but undeniable. The worker knew one thing now. This was not just about feeding her. This was about something much larger. Something no one else could see, because the giantess was not just a prisoner. She was trying to reach out. And he had reached back. The base carried on as if nothing had changed. Soldiers marched, officers barked orders, scientists scribbled notes. No one suspected that inside the hangar, behind those heavy steel doors, something impossible was happening. A worker and a giantess were building a bridge. Every night, he returned, always careful, always quiet. He brought food, water, sometimes even small objects, scraps of metal, pieces of cloth, anything she might use. He did not know why, only that her golden eyes followed every gift with strange intensity. The first time he handed her a piece of metal pipe, she did not throw it aside. Instead, she scratched patterns on the ground. Circles, stars, lines that stretched like rivers. He realized she was drawing. The worker crouched low, watching in awe. He had seen maps before, star charts the fleet carried. What she drew looked similar but larger, older, filled with shapes he could not name. He pointed at the drawing, then at the sky. "Stars?" he whispered. The giantess nodded once, slow and solemn. His chest tightened. She understood. She was trying to teach. Over the days, their strange communication grew. At first, it was tapping on the floor. Then simple words: food, water, friend. Her voice was deep, broken, but growing clearer each time. She repeated words until they sounded almost human. He tried too. He imitated the low hums she made, though his voice cracked and wavered. Sometimes she tilted her head, amused by his clumsy attempts. Other times she corrected him with a slow rumbling sound, as if guiding a child. It was not only language, it was trust. Once, while he placed food near her, his hand slipped and the tray clattered against the floor. Soldiers outside might have heard, but the giantess did not roar or lunge. Instead, she reached forward and carefully pushed the food back toward him, almost as if saying, "Do not be afraid." The worker froze, heart pounding. For the first time, he noticed the chains cutting into her skin. The metal dug deep, leaving raw marks that glowed faintly against her pale body. He swallowed hard, guilt stabbing him. She was suffering, and he could do nothing. But then she whispered again. "Friend." And for a moment the guilt faded, replaced by something stronger. One night the air outside roared with storms, alien thunder shaking the ground. Most soldiers stayed in the barracks, drinking and cursing the weather. The worker slipped into the hangar, rain dripping from his clothes. The giantess lifted her head slowly, her eyes glowing brighter in the storm's flashes. She hummed low, a sound that vibrated in his bones. This time she did not eat first. Instead, she pointed at the metal floor, motioning for him to sit. His breath caught. Sit with her? For a long moment he hesitated. Then, heart racing, he obeyed. He sat cross-legged, just out of reach of her chained arms. The hangar was filled with silence, broken only by distant thunder. Slowly, carefully, the giantess lowered her hand. Her enormous finger tapped the floor once, near him. Tap. The worker hesitated, then tapped back. Tap. She tapped again. He answered again. It became rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Back and forth, two beings, one giant, one small, bound by sound in the middle of a storm. When the thunder rolled louder, she made a deep hum, not angry, not sad, comforting, steady, like she was shielding him with her voice. For the first time, he felt safe in her presence. Later, as the days turned into weeks, he noticed something changing in her eyes. They no longer burned with pure rage. They no longer looked hollow from hunger. They carried something else now, curiosity. She began pointing at things. His clothes, his tools, even his face. She wanted to know. She wanted to learn. He answered as best as he could. Cloth, tool, human. He touched his chest. Human, she repeated, her deep voice trembling. Man. He laughed softly, though he quickly covered his mouth in fear of being heard. But she noticed. Her lips did not quite smile, but her eyes lit up. A golden spark that warmed the cold hangar. Each night their bond grew deeper, word by word, symbol by symbol. But he also felt the weight of danger pressing closer. One evening, as he prepared to leave, she caught his gaze and whispered a new word. War. The worker froze. His stomach turned cold. She pointed again at the star symbols scratched on the ground. She tapped her chains, then raised her hand toward the ceiling as if showing something above. Her eyes burned with urgency. He understood only part of it, but it was enough to make his skin crawl. She was not just a prisoner. She was warning him. Something was coming. But if he told the commander, they would laugh, or worse, punish him for listening to her. Still, her voice echoed in his mind as he left the hangar. That single word, heavy and sharp like a blade, war. That night he lay awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The storm outside had ended, but inside him, a storm had just begun. He had broken the rules. He had fed her, spoken to her, built trust with her. Now she was telling him something no human wanted to hear. A warning, and he was the only one who could listen. The worker could no longer escape the word that echoed in his mind. War. Giantess had whispered it with her deep, broken voice, her golden eyes burning with a strange urgency. She had not said it by accident. She had chosen it. For days afterward, he carried the weight of it like a stone on his chest. He moved through the colony base, fixing broken machines, hauling crates, answering officers with quiet obedience. Outwardly, nothing had changed. But inside, he was restless. Every glance at the night sky, every hum of the power stations, every shadow of the watchtowers reminded him. She was trying to tell him something, and no one else would listen. He thought about speaking to the commander. He imagined standing before the tall officer explaining, "She warned me. Something is coming." But he could already hear the laughter, the anger, the accusations. The commander had said it many times. Do not feed the monster. Do not trust the monster. If he revealed his secret, they would call him a traitor, and yet the Giantess had trusted him. Out of all humans, she had spoken to him first. She had given him her first word, friend. Would he now abandon her warning? That night he returned to the hangar once more. The heavy door groaned open, and the Giantess lifted her head from the shadows. Chains rattled softly as she moved, her golden eyes fixed on him, sharp, alive. She knew why he had come. He placed food before her as always, but she ignored it at first. Instead, she dragged her finger across the floor, carving new shapes into the metal dust. Lines stretched outward, circles overlapped. At first it looked like another star map, but then he saw it. Small shapes surrounding a larger one. Arrows, flames, symbols of destruction. The Giantess hummed, deep and low, pointing again and again at the sky above. Her voice rumbled, "War, come." The worker's blood ran cold. She was not speaking of some distant past. She was speaking of the future. She was warning him. For hours they tried to communicate. He asked clumsy questions, pointing at the drawings. She answered with hums, taps, and rough words. Slowly, painfully, he began to understand. The enemy was not her. The enemy was something else, something above, waiting in the stars. She had seen it before. Her people, giants like her, had faced it. And now it was coming here, to this world, to humans. He shivered as the truth settled into him. She was not humanity's prisoner. She was humanity's shield, but the chains held her down. The next day he could not concentrate on his duties. His hands shook as he repaired a broken crawler. Sweat dripped down his face, though the air was cold. Every sound seemed too loud. Every order barked by an officer felt heavy with ignorance. The soldiers joked as always, laughing about how long the monster would last before starvation. Some placed bets. Others spit when they passed the hangar. He wanted to shout at them. He wanted to scream, "She is not the enemy. She is warning us." But his throat locked shut. Fear bound him tighter than any chain. That evening he stayed awake long after the barracks had gone silent. He stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. He knew he was trapped between two worlds. If he ignored her, he betrayed her trust and perhaps doomed humanity. If he spoke up, he would be branded insane, maybe executed, and yet he remembered her eyes. That word? Friend, could he really stay silent? The storm returned on the fourth night. Lightning split the alien sky, thunder rolling across the barren plains. The worker slipped once more into the hangar, his clothes soaked with rain. The giantess was awake, standing as tall as the chains allowed, her hair whipping in the wind that pushed through the vents. She looked like a storm herself, powerful yet bound. When she saw him, she lowered herself to the ground, carving more symbols, more warnings. She pointed at the ceiling, at the stars beyond, and her voice thundered, "They come!" "They come," he flinched. Her voice was sharper now, more desperate. "They," he whispered. "Who?" She tapped the star chart with one massive finger, then drew a dark shape, an arrow, a blade. Her hum grew darker, heavier. "Kill all." His chest tightened. She was telling him that this enemy would not stop, would not spare, would not show mercy, not to her kind, not to his kind, and he was the only human who knew. He pressed a hand against his chest, trembling. Why tell me?" The giantess leaned forward, chains clinking. Her eyes glowed brighter, as if fire burned behind them. Her voice cracked, but her word was clear. "Friend." The worker felt his throat tighten. He almost wept. She had chosen him. Out of all the humans, she trusted him with this warning. Not the commander, not the scientists, not the soldiers. Him, a nameless worker. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. If he stayed silent, disaster might fall on them all. If he spoke, no one would believe him. And yet the choice was clear. He could no longer ignore her. As he left the hangar that night, the storm still raging outside, he felt a new weight in his heart. Not fear, not pity, responsibility. He was now the bridge between humanity and the giantess, and deep inside, he knew something that no one else on the base would ever admit. The war she spoke of was not far away. It was already on its way. The worker had carried the secret for too long. The giantess's warning echoed inside him like a drumbeat. "They come. Kill all." He tried to act normal, to keep his head down, but fear followed him everywhere. Every sound of engines in the sky, every flicker of static in the radios made him wonder if the enemy she spoke of was already here. But danger did not arrive from the stars first. It came from the humans around him. One evening, after a long day of hauling supplies, he slipped quietly into the kitchen. He took bread, fruit, and a flask of water, as he had many times before. But this time someone was watching. A soldier leaned in the shadows, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You've been busy, haven't you?" The worker froze. His breath caught in his throat. The soldier stepped closer, sneering. "We wondered why the monster hasn't died yet. Turns out some fool's been keeping her alive." Before he could reply, rough hands seized his arms. Another soldier had come from behind. The tray clattered to the floor, food rolling across the steel. "No," the worker cried, struggling. "You don't understand." They punched him in the stomach, silencing his words. By the time the commander arrived, the worker was on his knees, wrists bound, face bruised. Soldiers stood in a circle, watching with cruel satisfaction. The commander's boots echoed on the floor as he stopped before him. His eyes were cold as stone. "You fed the prisoner," the commander said. "Not a question." A sentence, the worker tried to speak. "She's not our enemy." "Enough!" The commander's voice thundered through the hall. "Do you think us fools? That beast is dangerous. She killed dozens when we captured her, and you feed her like a pet?" "She warned me," the worker shouted, desperation breaking his voice. "Something is coming. Not her people, something worse. She tried to tell me." The soldiers erupted in laughter. The commander's face twisted in fury. "Lock him up," he ordered. "Tomorrow we'll decide his punishment." They dragged the worker through the corridors, his feet scraping the floor. His heart pounded. He had failed. They would silence him forever. And the giantess, his only ally, would starve again, her warning lost. But as they shoved him into a cell, he heard it. A roar. Deep, thunderous, shaking the steel walls. The sound of chains straining, metal groaning, fury breaking loose. The giantess had seen. She had heard. The hangar shook with her rage. Her golden eyes blazed in the darkness, and her voice thundered through the base. "Friend!" Soldiers panicked, rushing toward the hangar, weapons drawn. The commander barked orders, but his voice was drowned in chaos. The worker pressed against the cell bars, breathless. She was trying to protect him. Then the alarm screamed. Red lights flashed. Sirens wailed. The voice of the base AI cut through the confusion. Warning. Orbital signatures detected. Multiple unknown vessels approaching atmosphere. The soldiers froze. The commander's face went pale. The enemy had arrived. Explosions thundered outside. The ground shook as fire rained from the sky. The colony base trembled under the first wave of attack. The worker gripped the bars, shouting, "She told you!" She warned us. But no one listened. Panic consumed them all. In the chaos, the cell door rattled open. A blast from above had torn the wall, bending the bars loose. Smoke filled the corridor, sparks crackling overhead. The worker staggered to his feet, coughing, his body aching but alive. He stumbled through the broken hallways, past fleeing soldiers and burning machines, until he reached the hangar. There she was, the giantess strained against her chains, muscles trembling, eyes blazing like suns. The walls shook with every pull. Sparks rained down as beams bent. She saw him, her gaze locked onto him through the smoke and fire. "Friend," she roared again, her voice rolling like thunder. His heart surged. She had not forgotten him even now. He ran to the control station, hands trembling. Keys. He needed keys. Chains thicker than steel could not be broken by hand, but the emergency panel glowed red nearby, showing the lock sequence. His fingers flew over the controls, guessing codes, slamming switches. Behind him, soldiers shouted, guns firing into the hangar. The giantess roared, raising her arms to shield herself. A bullet sparked near his head. He ducked, slamming the final switch. With a hiss, the first lock opened. The chains on her wrists fell. Her arms rose, free for the first time. She bellowed, the sound shaking the walls, and ripped the other chains apart with raw power. Metal screamed as it tore, and the ground shook as she stepped forward. The soldiers froze. Their bullets rattled harmlessly against her skin. She was free. The worker stumbled back, coughing in the smoke. The giantess bent low, her hand shielding him from falling debris. Her voice rumbled, softer now but powerful enough to shake his bones. "Friend, safe?" He stared up at her, tears burning his eyes. She was no longer a prisoner, no longer a captive. She was a storm unleashed, and she was on his side. The enemy ships roared overhead, their weapons lighting the sky. The colony burned, but for the first time, humanity had a protector, a giantess who had chosen them, because one man had dared to feed her, and now, side by side, they would face the war together. The base was no longer a fortress. It was a graveyard of fire and smoke. Enemy ships screamed across the alien sky, their weapons tearing through steel and stone. Soldiers shouted in panic, their lines broken, their courage shattered. The alarms wailed without end. And in the middle of the chaos, she rose. The giantess stood tall, her chains broken, her body glowing faintly with energy that pulsed beneath her skin. She was not slumped anymore, not starving, not silent. She was power given form, her golden eyes burning with fury and purpose. The worker stood at her feet, trembling, his clothes torn, his face blackened with smoke. But for the first time since he had arrived on this colony, he did not feel small. He felt seen, protected. The giantess lifted one massive arm as debris rained from above. A slab of steel heavy enough to crush 10 men fell from the ceiling. She caught it with one hand and hurled it aside like nothing. Her other hand curled protectively around the worker, shielding him from fire and falling wreckage. Her voice thundered, "Friend, safe." He pressed a hand to his chest, barely able to breathe. She had kept her promise. The soldiers at first didn't understand. They had aimed their guns at her, ready to kill. But then they saw what she was doing. She was not striking them down. She was striking the enemy. The first wave of drones stormed into the hangar, black machines with glowing red eyes and claws sharp as blades. The soldiers screamed, some fleeing, others firing desperately. The giantess did not flee. She lunged. Her massive hand slammed down, crushing 3 drones in a single blow. Sparks burst, metal shrieked, the floor trembled. Another drone flew toward her face, firing beams of searing light. She caught it midair, twisted it, and tore it apart with her bare hands. The soldiers froze. The worker's heart raced. She was a weapon unlike anything they had. She was fighting for them. The commander appeared in the smoke, his face pale, his voice breaking as he barked orders. "Fall back! Hold the line!" But no one listened. Fear had broken the chain of command. He turned, eyes widening as he saw the giantess free. For a moment, he looked ready to give the kill order. But then he saw the truth, how she crushed the enemy, not the humans. Still, his voice trembled with anger. "This is madness. She's not one of us." The worker stepped forward, his voice shaking but strong. "She is with us." The commander stared at him as if he were insane, but he could not deny the sight before him. The giantess stood tall, tearing the enemy apart. her golden eyes glowing brighter with every strike. Outside, the world burned. Explosions shook the horizon. The colony walls crumbled as enemy ships landed. Towers fell, the ground split, the sky filled with fire. But inside the hangar, something even more impossible was happening. A bond was turning into an alliance. The worker stumbled closer to her, coughing through the smoke. "We need to move. They'll destroy the base." The giantess lowered her head to him, her voice deep, rough, but clear. "Together." His chest tightened. She was not just saving him out of pity. She was choosing him, choosing humanity. The base doors exploded open as a massive enemy walker stormed in, a towering machine of black steel, bristling with weapons. It locked its red eyes on the giantess and fired a barrage of beams. The worker fell back, shielding his face. But the giantess stood her ground. The beams scorched her skin, but she did not fall. She roared, the sound shaking the very walls, and charged. Her fists struck the machine like thunder. Metal bent, sparks flew, steel screamed. The walker staggered, tried to crush her with its clawed legs. She grabbed one leg, muscles straining, and with a cry that echoed like a storm, she ripped the leg clean off. The machine toppled. The hangar floor split with the impact. The soldiers who had not fled stared in silence. Some dropped their guns, some whispered prayers. None of them had seen such power. For the worker, the moment was even greater. He saw not just her strength, but her choice. She had once been their prisoner, their captive, their so-called monster. But when the true enemy came, she fought for them. Not because of the commander, not because of orders, because one man had dared to feed her. He felt tears burn his eyes as he whispered to himself, "Humanity will never forget this." The battle outside raged on, but something had shifted. The soldiers who still stood began to regroup. They followed the giantess, fighting beside her, no longer against her. Hope once lost flickered back into their eyes. The commander, though silent, could not stop it. He watched as the worker stood beside the towering figure, guiding her with words, pointing where the enemy came. She listened to him, her massive form moving like a shield around him. Together, they pushed back the machines. But the worker knew this was only the beginning. The sky still burned with enemy ships. The war she had warned about was here, and this was only the first wave. Still, he also knew something else. They were no longer alone. Humanity was no longer helpless. The giantess, once starving in chains, now stood free and unbroken, her voice rising over the battlefield. Together. And with that word, humanity's fight truly began. The colony burned. The sky was a storm of fire and smoke, lit by enemy ships that blotted out the stars. Their machines crawled across the ground like a swarm, tearing through walls, crushing towers, slaughtering anything in their path. But in the middle of destruction, something rose that no one had expected. The giantess. She was no longer a chained captive, no longer starving, no longer silent. She was a warrior unleashed, her golden eyes blazing, her voice thundering across the battlefield. And she did not fight alone. At her feet, the worker ran through smoke and debris, guiding her with shouts and gestures. She listened to him, and only him, as if his words mattered more than the roar of cannons and the screams of soldiers. When he pointed at an enemy ship, she hurled a slab of broken steel through the sky, striking the vessel with such force it exploded in midair. When he shouted at soldiers to retreat, she moved to shield them, her massive arms forming a wall against the enemy's fire. The humans, who once spat at her, now followed her into battle. The commander stood on a broken platform, his uniform torn, his eyes wide. He could not deny it anymore. The monster he had ordered starved was saving his men. One soldier whispered in awe, "She fights for us," another said, trembling, "Because of him." He pointed at the worker who darted between the flames, fearless now, shouting orders like a man born for war. The commander's jaw tightened. He had ignored the warning. He had laughed at the worker's words. But now even he understood. Humanity was still alive only because of the bond between a giantess and a nameless man. The enemy pressed harder. More ships descended. The ground shook as massive machines landed, each one bristling with weapons taller than buildings. The soldiers faltered. Some cried out in despair. But the giantess did not hesitate. She raised her head to the burning sky and roared, a sound so powerful it silenced friend and foe alike. The enemy turned its guns on her. Beams of fire rained down and she stood firm, Her skin burned, her chains still clinging to her wrists, but she did not fall. Instead, she reached up, grabbed one of the enemy's landing struts, and with a cry that shook the ground, she pulled. The massive machine toppled sideways, crashing into another, exploding in a storm of fire. The humans cheered, their fear broken. They rallied behind her, surging forward with renewed strength. The tide of battle was shifting. Through it all, the worker never left her side. Once, when a drone swooped down with claws aimed for his head, the Giantess moved faster than thought. Her hand closed around the drone, crushing it into twisted scrap, and she whispered down to him in a voice like thunder and stone, "Friend. Safe." He looked up at her, tears mixing with ash on his face. "Together," he whispered back. Her lips did not smile, but her eyes glowed brighter, as if that single word gave her the strength of 1,000 warriors. By dawn, the first wave of the enemy lay in ruins. Their ships smoldered in the distance. Their machines littered the ground, torn apart by human weapons and the hands of a giantess. The colony still stood, scarred but unbroken. Soldiers leaned on each other, exhausted but alive, and everywhere they looked they saw the same sight, the towering figure of the giantess, standing guard over them like a guardian carved from legend. The commander, bloodied and silent, finally lowered his head. He could not deny it. The worker had been right. Humanity had survived this night because of the one they had once called a monster. When the sun broke over the horizon, light spilling across the battlefield, the giantess lowered herself to the ground. Smoke curled around her like a cloak. She looked at the worker, her golden eyes soft now, no longer burning with rage but shining with something gentler. She spoke in broken, heavy words, but clear enough for every human to hear. "Not monster, friend." The soldiers bowed their heads. Some wept, others whispered prayers. None laughed anymore. None mocked. They understood now. The worker stepped forward, his voice strong though his body trembled. "She warned us. She saved us. Never forget this day." And they never would. From that moment, the story spread. Across the colony, across the fleet, across humanity. The tale of the worker who defied orders, who fed the starving captive, who listened when no one else did. The tale of the giantess who had once been chained but rose to fight not against humanity, but for it. People whispered her name in awe, though she had none they could speak. They called her the Guardian. They called him the Brave. Together they became legend. And as new ships appeared in the distant sky, as the shadow of war loomed larger, humanity stood taller than before. Because they knew they were not alone, the giantess had chosen them, and humanity would never forget.